Hello again, Steve here, and away from my main location of operation once again. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can learn about ourselves because of Jesus and Mary. Oh, how could I come up with a topic like that? Well, I've talked about this before, and I may have done a video, a very brief clip of it, to do with somebody I was talking to about the archetype of Jesus. Not that long ago, I just forget, but I just had some more thoughts on it, so I figured I'd carry on. So, I was talking to this person a while back, and this individual I would describe as some sort of a wave of feminist who was a little bit put down by the mansplaining and what have you, and just references to man in the, in the general sense. Man as in mankind, right? And we were talking about Jesus as either a historical character or an archetype for something. And I made the point that in terms of the the value of what the story of Jesus has to provide. One of the values would be that, well, either he's a good example or some example anyway of an archetype of man. And she right away snapped at, kind of snapped at me, but not really. I mean, she's quite rational, but I mean, she made the point quite clear that, and woman. And then I just shot back. Well, I said, well, I didn't say men, I said man. And woman obviously falls into the category of man. I mean, in the original sense of the word, like you look at the species, it's man. I mean, there's Neolithic man and, these different kinds of man, modern man and what have you. This, of course, includes. Like, if we look out in the field and we see a bunch of horses, we say there's a bunch of horses. We don't necessarily say, well, there might be 4 mares in there and some stallions. And well, actually, a horse is a stallion, technically, as well. But if we see a bunch of them in the field, we don't say, so it's a general sense, right? And I made the point in my other video, too, that it's unfortunate that man doesn't have, that we don't have a more androgynous term for everybody. Like at one time there was, my understanding is, man was the neutral, sexually neutral in terms of a word, and there was with man and he-man, right? With men and he-men. So each one had a prefix, which would be a better way of doing things. I think in some languages probably do that. Now, in thinking about it more, I would argue, I would make the case now that Jesus is, in fact, more of an archetype for men. That's right, ladies, you heard it. I'm just making the case. Because if you look at the religion, especially the Catholic version of it, Catholicism version of Christianity, they have several archetypes in there. And I was in a big, grand Spanish church, Latin American church. Oh, these churches are amazing down in central Mexico. It's just astounding. You got to see them. But up at the front, there was God the Father, right at the very top. And then to the left, there was Jesus. And then to the right, there was Mary. And to me, I was thinking, there's the Trinity, right? And you have this untouchable God, overlord character. But then you have the personifications. Of course, the Catholics will tell you that Mary is not God, but I mean, she is kind of God. I mean, she divinely, had immaculate conception and ascended into heaven and all this sort of stuff. I mean, that's getting into the realm of Shiva, So it's definitely godly, no question about it, divine for sure, and sinless, etc. And the mother of God and so on. So anyway, yeah, I mean, this whole, I think a discussion like this should ideally be void of feminist overtones or whatever, because I was talking to somebody else not long ago about something like this, and he made the case for male feminism. And I said, well, how about we just be men? Why don't we have strong men? Because he said they made the case, well, we have to support women and so on. I said, well, you know what? Strong men can do that. Like a masculine man can be a great protector and provider and so on of women, and a supporter of what women want to do. Try to have them have a healthy life. How about we be humanists? Why do we have to be feminists, masculinists, and so on? And that's an aside, though. That was a little bit of an aside, nothing to do with this. So, in saying that, Jesus, I think, could be considered, whether people agree with it or not, it could be considered as an archetype for man in general, but specifically for men. And which means that then Mary could be a good archetype for women. And, we see it in terms of the stories of Christianity, in particular the Catholicism side of it. That's what I grew up in, a very religious family, Catholic version. And Mary was seen as this intercessor, somebody who could intercede on your behalf. And think of that as a motherly character. So often kids will go to mommy to try to get something that they can't normally get. And the mother has this more of a intuitive connection emotionally. She feels the pain more directly of that child, and therefore will go to work to try to sort out and soothe the pain of that child, will intercede on behalf of the injury to that child's emotions in a way, right? And you also notice too how societies that tend to be, I would say, more emotional, like, nobody would say for a minute, I don't think, that Latin societies are not quite emotional. I mean, they are very expressive and sort of that touchy-feely and so on thing. And they're much more apt to be, gravitate towards the Mary character, the motherly character. And a lot of even tribal societies and so on are more matriarchal. And also, if you look at the Catholic Church, which is a central control or socialist, basically, organization, it tends to be, it tends to gravitate heavily towards the Mary character. I would say that growing up, look, we'd say the Rosary, I think we would say 10 Hail Marys to every 1 Our Father, and no prayers to Jesus, which is rather interesting. So Mary overwhelmingly was this character of high regard. So I would say it's a Marian, more of a Christian religion. It's more of a Marian religion, I would say. Whereas the more mainstream, the more Protestant they became, and right over to the evangelical, they become more Christian or Jesusan approach, which is more the masculine and the more individual, the more freedom oriented, which is very, very masculine. Freedom is a very masculine thing, whereas socialism and central control is more of a woman thing. Why? Because a woman has got to care for, I would say anyway, has got to care for very dependent individuals, a bunch of, a little brood of kids, and she has to be the master of them. I mean, you can't just let kids run wild, and then, because it's very, very dangerous historically. Whereas when men become men, they have to become independent in a way, because they have to, be the providers of their families and what have you, and they have to go out into the world. Historically, I'm not saying this as some sort of a sexist, just an observation of the nature of us, and these things are very, very deep within us. The way we can deny them, but as a general rule, people are either heavily masculine or heavily feminine, as opposed to feminist. I mean, I'll make the case for, I want to make the distinction there too. So I guess, in talking about these sorts of things, there's got to be some sort of something we can learn from it. Well, I would say that just observing these distinctions of the way certain people are, certain cultures that would gravitate towards the feminine, certain cultures that would gravitate towards the masculine. The feminine creates more of a central control, and the masculine creates more of a individual freedom, and large organization too, huge organizations, because central control is very difficult to manage on a large scale for long, whereas individualism, the masculine, tends to be able to, especially in free markets, right? Like you can have large communist organizations which will last for a while, heavily centrally controlled. However, when you have a win-win large organizations like free market businesses and so on, they tend to be very masculine controlled, because everybody has to be semi-autonomous in a freedom, in a free market, in a win-win situation like that, as opposed to a top-down. So I would say that, first of all, I would say that not all men tend to be heavily masculine, and not all women tend to be heavily feminine. So this is not to say that all women are going to be, matriarchal, and all men are going to be patriarchal. That's not my case here. My case is just an observation rather, of human nature. And the importance of this is to learn about ourselves, right? Because if we don't understand the nature of our species, of the way we are and the way we interact, it's a challenge and an honest sort of a critique of it. It's a little bit of a challenge to really understand ourselves. And of course, the mission of the Inner Genie Project is to gain, first of all, self-knowledge, right? And then to develop self-confidence and fulfillment in life. And all of those go hand in hand, and especially the foundation of self-knowledge. So I think we can learn something about ourselves from looking at old archetypes and understanding that they developed right straight out of our human nature, I would say. I mean, some people are going to say, hey, Steve, no, these are divine things, divinely inspired, it came from God and so on. Well, I mean, okay, I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to go there at this point. But all I'm going to say is that human nature, humanity has clung on to these old archetypes for a long, long, long time. So surely we can learn a little bit about them, a little bit from them, that is to say. Steve here again, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share, and please visit me at theinnergenie.com. Talk again soon. Bye for now.